Back here on CBS Sports HQ, college football is almost here, and we are going to go through Danny Kanell's CFP predictions. I had to take a double take here because I saw Louisville, USC making the CFP according to Danny in this prediction. Bama and Georgia, Ole Miss making it out of Danny's favorite conference. That would be the SEC. And then the final four being Penn State and Ohio State, the Big Ten teams battling it out, and then Clemson and Alabama on the other side of the bracket. So let's welcome on Danny Kanell to talk about it. Danny, we got two teams coming out of the ACC, one of those being Louisville. So what about this Louisville team makes you think that they could potentially get into the CFP and maybe make a little bit of a run?
So, Jacqueline, just to be clear, like, I don't like being all chalk, right? Like, it's easy to say
Sure.
Clemson and Miami are going to be the two teams from the ACC, but I don't know if I necessarily trust Miami yet with some moving parts at wide receiver. Carson Beck first year, but I do like the trend I've seen from Jeff Brom at Louisville. Historically, he's done a phenomenal job with transfer quarterbacks, and he's got another one. Miller Moss comes in from USC, where he got benched last year. I think their offense is one that's going to be pretty explosive, maybe not so much in the passing game as much as the run game. Isaac Brown, who is just a sophomore, is one of the more electric backs in the ACC. He was first team all conference at the preseason media days. And I think people forget sometimes Louisville went into Clemson last year and got a win by physically dominating them. They played for the ACC title a couple years ago against Florida State. They've been a consistent winner, so I trust them more than most. So I got Louisville as that second team from the ACC.
All right, so Boise State, not a lot of folks last season would have had Boise State in their bracket prediction, right? They had this magical CFP run with Ashton Genty. And Danny, you have some faith that they can kind of do it again, even though Ashton Genty's not there. He's playing on Sundays.
I do. And so do the odds makers. By the way, of all the conferences in college football, Power 4 and Group of 5 combined, they're the only team that is actually minus money to win the Mountain West, and they're minus 110. It actually speaks to the gap between them and everybody else. They are that good. And you mentioned Ashton Genty no longer being there, but their quarterback, actually, Maddox Matson's one of those players that really was overlooked last season. He actually made really good decisions, and of course it's easier, and they're going to have to replace Ashton Genty, but the players really love the coach. They've done a pretty good job not losing a lot of their better players to the transfer portal, getting guys to buy into another playoff run. And I do think their schedule is very, very manageable. They have a road trip to Notre Dame, but outside of that, they should be 11-1, similar to last season. And if their only loss is in Notre Dame, another team I think has a chance to be in the playoffs, then I'm going to go ahead and pencil them in. I do think this is part of the conversation, though, why I think the Group of 5 should have their own playoff, because this is just, they're getting one spot. They're guaranteed it. Does Boise State belong in there? In the current system, the way it's set up, yes. Are they one of the top 12 teams in college football? I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and put them in there.
I feel like we're always workshopping the CFP bracket, whether we should expand it or the format and all of that stuff. If we look towards the bottom of your bracket, Danny, we saw Kansas State. You have this team winning the Big 12 to make it to the CFP, and a lot of folks have some high expectations for Avery Johnson to kind of take that next step. So I'm assuming, given this bracket, you do as well.
You're right, Jacqueline. I like Chris Kleiman a lot, the head coach there at Kansas State. Ultimately, I have the Big 12 as a one-bid league because of all the win totals, the highest is 8.5, of which Kansas State has an 8.5 win total. So does Texas Tech. So do a couple other teams in there that are towards the top, Arizona State as well. You mentioned Avery Johnson. He had the weight of the world on his shows last year for the Wildcats. Remember, they sent Will Howard packing. They said, we're going to look to our future and go with Avery Johnson, even though Will Howard had won a Big 12 championship there, and they let him go off to Ohio State. The rest is kind of history. They were expecting Avery Johnson to be a superstar in his first year, and he was really good. The problem was he had a lot of very typical first-year starter type games. He struggled against BYU, cost him a game against Houston, who was wasn't very good, had a couple interceptions in that one, as well as Arizona State. In their losses, he struggled. Other than that, he played really good. The one thing they've been harping on for Avery Johnson is all season is consistency. You don't have to play the role of Superman, which is a tendency for young players to do. He's got a ton of talent. I think this team is fit. I think they win the Big 12, but ultimately I think they're the only Big 12 team that gets into the playoff.
All right, so the Big 12 team gets one, according to Danny. A different story for the Big 10 because you have 4 Big 10 teams making the CFP, and we see it here: Penn State as the 1 seed, Ohio State as the 4, Oregon as the 6, and then USC squeaking in as an 11 seed. So, Danny, why do you think the Big 10 could get 4 teams in, say over, I don't know, like the SEC?
I do think, Jacqueline, it's similar to what happened last year. I think the depth of the conference is actually better for, or the lack of depth in the conference is better for the Big 10. Like you see in the SEC, the depth becomes an issue because a lot of those teams, like in the 5th, 6th, or 7th spots, they start banging up on each other. You start getting losses in the loss column, and those do matter. Where at the top tier of the Big 10, we haven't seen quite as many upsets, and that's where I think you kind of trust the talent level is going to be significantly better, clearly with Ohio State and Penn State, but also with Oregon. And then this is kind of my wild card. I had a couple of them on here where I went a little bit outside the box. Lincoln Riley at Big 10 Media Days in Las Vegas, he had a quiet confidence about him. I think he's made some changes to the strength staff to try to bring some physicality and a little bit of a tougher team out there to LA. And they were really close. He said it several times last year. He said, we're close. No fan wants to hear close, but they did take Penn State to overtime, a team that was in the playoffs. They did play Notre Dame pretty tough until a couple late interceptions there that made the game look a little bit lopsided. They did, get some pretty good wins as well. I think they take a big step forward. And the thing that I like the most about them is they feel really good about their quarterback, Jaden Maeva. They could have gone to the transfer portal and brought somebody else in, but they felt like they saw enough from last season to go ahead and trust him with the job again this year. So I've got USC kind of pulling it all together this year. Lincoln Riley's had a really good track record evaluating quarterbacks. If he trusts Jaden Maeva to lead this team, I'll trust him as well.
All right, Danny, I know you said this is your wild card team, but the time has come to kind of walk us through the bracket and tell us just how far the dream lasts for USC in this prediction.
Oh, I've got them going out there. I've got them winning a first-round game, but I do not have them beating Alabama. That's Alabama, by the way, is my team from the SEC. I've got them winning the conference, and I do think that's where USC's kind of Cinderella story, if you will. I mean, it's hard to call USC a Cinderella, but not many people are picking them. That's where I think the physicality could catch up to them placing an SEC squad in Alabama.
All right, so Notre Dame, they come in as a 5 seed here. They were a 7 seed last season. So how is the pathway going to be any more difficult or more the same here when you have them going up against Ohio State?
Oh my goodness. So this team, I think, gets to the playoffs because of their schedule. It starts off really tough. They have to go on the road to Miami, which they are a slight favorite in. Then they have Texas A&M coming to South Bend, a team they beat last year. And then it's like off to the races. Like they should be favored in almost every single game. They might be favored against every single game this season. And I know they've got question marks. They lose their quarterback last year, and they've got a battle unfolding at quarterback. But Jeremiah Love is one of the best running backs in the country, if not the best. I trust Marcus Freeman to put together a squad that's very physical, and against this schedule, not having to play a conference championship game, I think they're almost a lock to get to the playoffs. I don't think they make it quite as far as they did last year because I think there's a little bit cap to their ceiling because of the questions at quarterback, whether it's C.J. Carr or Keelan Russell. I do think they could be, or excuse me, Kenny Minchie. I do think there could be some struggles there at quarterback, but I trust them to get there.
So, Danny, if we pull up your Final Four and what that looks like, it's interesting when we kind of reflect on last season, right? Because it felt like last season, byes were a bad thing. Like all the teams in the Final Four that made it to that point had all played the first game. They did not have a bye. We saw what happened to Oregon, right? So these are teams that are getting a bye that you have in the semifinals. So does that concern you a little bit? Like maybe rest versus rust in that situation?
No, Jacqueline, I heard a lot of that. And even Dan Lanning kind of was making a case saying, I wish we didn't have to wait so long. Of course he's going to say that. They got absolutely boat raced in the Rose Bowl out there by Ohio State. That might have been more about in-game adjustments that Dan Lanning failed to address that Ohio State was able to take advantage of, and they didn't respond quickly enough. I always think there's an advantage to having more time off to get players healthy. We're talking about players at that point in the season having to play 14 games, for up to that point. So the ability to get a little breather, to get healthy, I think is way more valuable. Now, sure, there could be a hot team that gets hot and they kind of catch fire at the right time. We saw that with Ohio State last year. But if you remember, Ohio State did not play in the Big Ten championship, and they had a 3-week wait until their game against Tennessee. That time off did not seem to bother them as they came out of the gates as hot as anybody and never looked back. So I think it's been a little bit overblown. I would always want more rest if I was a coach.
Yeah, Ohio State didn't look like they skipped a beat against Tennessee in that CFP matchup. So the Final Four for you here, we have Penn State and Ohio State, and then Bama and Clemson. So when it's all said and done, Danny, give us your prediction on who's going to be winning the national title.
So I'm taking a leap of faith because James Franklin does not have a great record, 1-15 against top 5 team opponents. He's going to have to dispel that notion, but I think they've got the recipe that has worked for the last two national champions. At Michigan and at Ohio State the last couple years, you had a narrative that players came back that could have gone to the NFL, and they wanted to come back to do something special. Drew Aller as the quarterback, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, they all decided to come back. Really 3 most critical pieces of their offense. They go out, they go get Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator from the national championship Ohio State Buckeyes. They've got a defense that always is towards the top 5 of college football. Deny Dennis Sutton, I think he steps up in the role that where Abdul Carter had last year. It does come down to Drew Aller. Can he step up? They signed 3 wide receivers in the portal this offseason to try to give him some better weapons. It's also his second year with his offensive coordinator, Andy Koltnicki. So, and by the way, their regular schedule is a 2-game schedule. They have Oregon at home, Ohio State on the road. I think they split those. I think they're 11-1 in the regular season. I think they get the best of Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. And at a third time they play, I think they beat them. And ultimately, I think they take home the national title.
Now, we're showing the Nittany Lions a lot of love on this show. We had James Franklin as the preseason coach of the year. Danny's predicting them to win the national title. High expectations for James Franklin and his squad. DK, we appreciate it. By the way, that would be Penn State's first natty since 1986 if they can pull it off. You can hear Danny Kanell and the guys on the Cover 3 podcast, always breaking down the very latest headlines in college football. You can download, follow, listen wherever you listen to your favorite pods, or you can watch right now by scanning that QR code on your screen.